Welcome to Vijetha IAS Academy. I am Mohammad Sahbaz Khan, the Faculty of Economics at this academy. I have more than 6 years of experience into teaching and mentoring for civil servant aspirants. As per my credential, I have done Master of Finance and Control as well as postgraduate diploma in Business Finance. So today I'll discuss a very important, or I would say is a very interesting topic, which is a very much issue among the masses. We generally talks about it in a public, and many of this time the newspaper, the TV channels, the news TV channels are filled with such news with respect to the rising prices of any commodity. Especially it comes to haunt us when the prices of essential commodities such as onion, oil goes upward in directions to the level which becomes difficult for a common person or a middle class to afford that particular commodity. So from this very perspective, today I'll try to discuss what is inflation, what are the different types of inflation, as well as the relationship between inflation and economic growth, with some interesting terms and principles into this whole idea of inflation, which is generally in Hindi is called महंगाई. Okay, so generally this inflation is nothing but rise in general price level in any economy. This is what I have told you. This inflation is all about rise in general price level of commodity and services in any economy. This is inflation. So you might seen this phenomena now and then. The prices of commodity goes up and also goes downward. So a simple this definition is rise in a general price level of commodities and services in any economy. This is all about inflation. Now before going deep into this idea of inflation more, let's discuss what are the different types of inflation. So in terms of these types, this inflation is based on the growth rate so on the basis of the rate of growth or the speed of the growth or speed of this price rise. On that basis, it could be categorized into certain types. It starts from, first is creeping inflation. Next, walking inflation. Next is galloping inflation. Last one is hyperinflation. So this all types of inflation is categorized based on the speed or the rate of growth in prices. So in this creeping inflation, the inflation rate rises between 2 to 3%. This is creeping nature of inflation or the price rise. where the 2 to 3% growth in prices can be observed every month. This creeping inflation is, I would say, imperative for any economy to grow, or I would say the growth in GDP. This inflation has a positive relation or proportional relation with respect to this economic growth. We'll discuss separately this topic, the relationship between economic growth and inflation. But before now, this inflation is a must for any economy to grow. Now, from this creeping to walking inflation, this walking inflation, where the inflation rate growth in a general price level is more than 3% to 10%. So this walking inflation is a kind of alarming bell for the policy makers to give attention to this inflation phenomena, because now the value of rupees, Indian rupees, is going further down, and it has different implication for the external sector and overall for a general economy. Now, with this inflation goes beyond 3%, but still within 10% limit, it is called walking inflation. Now, from this walking inflation, when this inflation rate further moves up and goes beyond this 10%, it reaches a stage of galloping inflation, or this is also called running inflation. Here, the price rise goes beyond 10% and generally within 50%. This is exactly where this money's losses is value to the tune of a heavy rise close to 10 to 50% in a price level. So this galloping inflation is bad for any economy. Now this economy is on the verge of going into the hyperinflation stage, which is a zenith of this eradication of the value of Indian rupees. The price rise 50%. Has been seen in Hungary in 1946. One decade back at Zimbabwe between 2004 to 9, and very recently in a country which is called Venezuela. Inflation leads to erosion in the value of local currency. Here the money loss is two of its important function, which is value and medium of exchange. Money is just like a sheet of papers. It doesn't have any value. It cannot be exchanged in the market to buy commodity and services. Here, an individual need a full gunny bag of local currency to buy a loaf of bread. The situation is a vicious in nature, which further creates the problem in the socio-economic or political economy realm of this society. It leads to political instability or anarchy in the society as well. So, these what exactly I have told, these types of inflation. The first on the rate of growth, the creeping inflation, walking inflation, which is also called trolling inflation, and now this hyperinflation, which has happened within these countries, which leads to the erosion of local currency, where the currency lost its two important function, which is store of value and of exchange. Beyond this inflation can further be categorized on the basis of its causes. On the basis of its causes, what is the reason behind this? This is based on this inflation of two types. This is cost push inflation and pull inflation. As this seen in its literal terms, this says demand pull inflation. Cost push inflation. Inflation we have understood, this is simple, or rise in a general price level. This could be because of these two phenomena. Fine, and this could also be expressed in terms of types of inflation. So, the causes of inflation is based on two factors, demand and supply. In fact, this price mechanism, this price setting of this price in the market economy is based on this idea of demand and supply. In the words of Adam Smith, the father of classical economics, these are the invisible hand, the forces of the market, or the market forces, the invisible hand. This is nothing but this idea of demand and supply, which exactly set the prices of any commodity and services in the market. So this is based on this two factor, which is demand and supply. When demand goes up for any commodity, let's say for the potato, which was earlier 10 rupees per kg, now after 3 months this has reached to 30 rupees per kg. So this sudden spurt for the tomato, this price exactly gives this idea is what with respect to demand is rising, with respect it is constant. I would say in a different word, when the supply is a constant but demand is rising, it leads to rise in the prices of any commodity. Same as when the demand is constant, this is constant, at the same time supply suddenly goes down, it also leads to rise in prices. If this demand is further going down but the supply is constant, it leads to decrease in the price level, which is called deflation. The same as true with this supply. When the supply overshoots, demand is constant, it leads to decrease in the price level in economy. So on the basis of it, we have inflation and we have cost push inflation. So this demand pull inflation in economy would happen due to certain factors, which could be there is a sudden increase in the money supply in the economy. So in this manner, the sudden rise in a purchasing power of the people, which could be the reason or the consequence of high money supply into the economy. So this high or large money supply into the economy could also be the reason, or could also be the consequence of the fiscal as well as the monetary policy of the government. So with respect to the fiscal policy, if the government decreases tax rate through this monetary, the Central Monetary Authority has lowered down the policy rate, such as repo rate. This also fuel the economy with more cash, or I would say in a different words, people has more purchasing power. So in that case, this leads to demand pull inflation because of high purchasing power with the individual. Now this cost push inflation as this name suggests, it has to rise in factor of production. Factor of production is simple. This land, labor, capital, entrepreneur, or I would say in a very generic terms, the raw material to produce a finished product. So rise in factor of production or the raw material prices leads to rise in the prices in the economy. So this cost, the phenomena which is cost of the production, includes raw material prices, wages, labor, a certain fixed cost, as well as when it reaches also imposes indirect taxes such as GST on product. So the final value or the prices paid by consumer is high as compared to previous activity. So this now you might see this rise in the prices simply happened because of this cost factor, which is nothing but rise in the cost of production. It also includes the government's measures with respect to the indirect taxes. So these are the two exactly the types or the causes of inflation in any economy. Now we are moving towards the discussion, a relationship between inflation and economic growth. Inflation has a positive relationship with the economic growth. Just go back into the memory lanes. Few minutes ago I have told you during this types of inflation on the basis of rate of growth in the price, there was creeping inflation. This creeping inflation, where the rise in or the rate of inflation growth is 2 to 3%. This is must for any economy to grow. I have told you at that particular point of time. So here now, this inflation is directly proportional to economic growth. Why? Why this is directly proportional? Why? When the inflation goes up, the economy grow, or vice versa. The reason being is this: price rise in economy leads to a motivation factor for producer or the manufacturer to produce more, as their rising prices are a kind of incentive for them to open up new ventures or to expand their businesses. So this level of inflation or rise in price level in an economy should be there. It's a must. So this creeping inflation, so this relationship between the inflation and economic growth is positively correlated. But wait, but here there is a caveat, a warning. This warning sign stop. The economics further says the inflation beyond this 2 to 3% or this creeping when it further goes to running a galloping inflation to hyperinflation, this is a bane, or I would say bone. What is this? This is a bad or it's a worse for any economy. In this case, the long-term goal for any economy is price stability. The abrupt increase or decrease of the prices can set the economy in disorder. So this relationship, as I'll summarize, for the short term, this is positively correlated, where this certain rate of inflation is a must for any economy to grow, as it gives motivation to the producer or manufacturer to produce more or expand their businesses. But when the prices goes up further, it leads to many problems in the economy, as we have seen while discussing the galloping and hyperinflation, where the money lost its value, or I would say the store value and the medium of exchange is two important factors the money lost. It is a further other ramification in a different sector of the economy. So for the long term, there must be a check on this price level so that money could function efficiently without facing any kind of disruptive economic waves. Now, this relationship this Phillips curve was invented, or this relationship has been better understood by a famous economist whose name was A.W. Phillips. He was a New Zealand-born economist. He established this relationship by constructing this Phillips curve. So this Phillips curve exactly established relationship between inflation and rate of unemployment in the economy. So this talks about the relationship between inflation and unemployment in the economy. He further says this relationship is a kind of inverse relationship. This is what inverse relationship. It means what? When inflation goes up, it leads to decline in unemployment rate in economy. Okay, so this relationship is a kind of inverse, this inflation and unemployment. Inverse relationship, where when the economy with this inflation, it leads to decline in unemployment in any economy. This could be shown through a curve. So this is y-axis. On this y-axis, we have rate of inflation. On this x-axis, we have rate of unemployment. Percent, 4%, 6%, 8%, 10%. This rate of unemployment 2%, 4% and 5%. This is slope. Here this Phillips curve, it says this point within inflation was 10%, unemployment rate of unemployment was 1%. 8% leads to the further 1 point something percent. When it comes further at 6%, the rate of unemployment is. So this exactly is the idea of rate of inflation and rate of unemployment. When this inflation goes up and this price goes up in this fashion, it leads to decline in rate of unemployment, which is 1% at 10% price level. So this curve is called Phillips curve. So this is a relationship which has been drawn by this New Zealand born economist. His name is A.W. Phillips. This is an inverse relationship between inflation as well as rate of unemployment in any economy. Further, we'll discuss different terms related to inflation. These terms are rather interesting or the catchy terms we might find in a news article and also in the academic discussion. These are the first, we'll discuss the terms related to deflation, further disinflation, further reflation. Now this term doesn't end here, it further goes up further. This is what? This is further stagflation. This is rather important one, we'll discuss in detail. Now further, another term after this stagflation we have skewflation. So we'll discuss one by one what are these exactly terms related to the inflation. This is nothing but the play with prices in an economy. So now deflation or disinflation. First discuss these two terms. So this deflation is nothing but decline in our prices. Or I would say this inflation, this also holds true. This is also decline in the prices. Why they're confused? This terms also confuses us. What is the differences between disinflation and deflation? Suppose in any economy there is in the price level, or I would say this inflation, for the inflation to measure inflation discuss separately, consumer price index, wholesale price index. This is what these index numbers when goes like this prices was 5%, this further goes for the 4%, then 3%, then 1%, then it goes 0 to this, now further it goes negative, in negative fashion, 1% minus, so this is what exactly is going further. So at this level, when this prices is declining 5%, 4%, 3%, 1%, but still this inflation or the prices is at 0. This is not negative. Here, what is this? This is what? Decline in rate of growth of the prices. Earlier, the prices was rising at the rate of 5%, but it's still rising at the rate of 4%, but it's still price rising at the rate of 3%, still it is rising at the rate of 1%. But further, when it goes to the 0, when this price equal, and further when it goes to negative, at this negative, this situation is called, when prices goes into this negative territory, is called deflation. And this inflation. Got it, guys? So this is deflation and inflation, where at this deflation prices are negative. Disinflation, prices are still rising but at a declining rate. This is what differences between disinflation and deflation. Now, rather, I've discussed deflation is what, when this prices is going down from here exactly, after going this dip into this prices level in an economy, when and prices again recover, it means prices again going up. So this upward trend is called reflation. It means reflation. This inflation recovered. This rising in the prices is recovered. Okay. Now, this is what? Reflation. Now, the important term after this, we'll discuss stagflation. Stagflation. So here, now, this stagflation is rather important, or I would say this is a paradox or a paradoxical situation where this normal fashion of behaving with respect to the prices in the economy goes in a crazy manner. Here what happened, this stagflation is rather a paradox. This comes from this word stagflation. Here this word is stagnation. Or other is inflation. The situation is in contrast with the situation we have discussed with respect to the relationship between economic growth and inflation. Now, what happened? We have discussed, just goes few minutes back into your memory lane and try to recollect what I have told you. This is what during Phillips course we have discussed. Inflation has inverse relationship with respect to unemployment. It means, in a different terms, I would say a certain amount of price rises is a must for any economy to grow further. When the economy grew, the rate of unemployment further declines, or the employment increases in the economy. But this is a very paradox situation where what happened exactly, economy inflation is in the economy, or the prices is rising very fast in the economy. Due to this prices rises, the cost of living is going costlier or going upward in direction. This prices rises, but it doesn't lead to rise in the economy or rate of employment here not decline. This is what exactly unemployment, I would say stagnation in the economy. The GDP numbers doesn't grow. When it doesn't grow, the employment doesn't increase, but employment doesn't increase, but inflation is increasing. This is a very alarming situation. This is, the people are under the heat of this rising prices in the economy, where most of those individual businesses cannot keep up with rising cost of living into the economy. Their income cannot cope up with rising prices in the economy. So it brings the situation, bring misery to the people. So this is called stagflation, which is combination of the two words, which is stagnation with respect to the GDP stagnation. GDP is not growing, employment is not being increasing, is not being produced in the economy. At the same time, inflation is rising. The prices of commodities, rather essential commodities, are rising further up. The middle class or many of these classes cannot afford many of this essential commodity to satisfy their wants. They are in need, but this need doesn't convert into wants, as this market economy only recognizes the demand doesn't need. So from here, now this stagnation, the another term which is rather interesting, which is skewflation. So this is got skewed, this inflation, skew inflation against word. This is a catchy, this inflation is normally happened the two sectors of economy. In a one sector, as normal cost of living in any economy, such as CPI, this is rising cost of living. But you might find a phenomena where the certain sector of the economy, there is a decline in the prices. Let's say the best case for this could be the housing sector or the real estate sector, where you might find there is a declining of the prices. The prices of the flats is going down. There's nobody to buy these flats. People doesn't have that much money, and at the same times, in the economy, generally, the cost of living is rising. So this is also a paradox situation. The situation or the standard case of behavior of the prices is called skewflation. Okay, now from this skewflation, further discuss the different measurement to measure this rate of inflation in any economy. So these instruments to measure inflation in economy three types, or the inflation, I would say another word, this inflation or the prices could be measured by through these instruments. This is first is called CPI, which is Consumer Price Index, WPI, Wholesale Price Index. Another next one is now discussion further unfolds into this discussion of the instrument to measure inflation in India. So this could be measured by three instruments, which is Consumer Price Index, Wholesale Price Index, and GDP deflator. Now we'll start with Wholesale Price Index. WPI. Wholesale Price Index. Before inflation targeting, when this Vijetha Patel committee suggested to make CPI as an important anchor to measure inflation in India, before this inflation targeting, there was wholesale price index. Still is wholesale. This used to be the main policy marker or important rate which used to measure inflation in India. But after that recommendation, the government and the RBI has made an agreement which is called as Monetary Policy Framework. This has been brought into in 2015 between government and RBI. So here the policy marker from wholesale price index to consumer price index. But before going further into this discussion, let's say first what exactly this wholesale price index. This is what this inflation, I would say, a rise in level in the economy, price level it is measuring. This price can be measured how? Because this prices has different, this is what the prices of onion which is in Bihar could be different from UPs. This could be slightly different. So this is not possible exactly to make a clear picture of this what is prices. But for this, to solve this, the economists what exactly prepare a index. This index is nothing but a percentage value with respect to a basket of commodities. Because in any economy there could be multiple kind of products. It cannot fit like, it could be like more than any of this product could be there in different realm. But for as a representative, certain is taken into this basket, and this basket where this certain groups of commodities has different weightage according to the use of the use by the individual. So this basket exactly, this WPI, the first time, this first time it has been released during 1942. This WPI is released by DIP, Industrial Promotion, Department of Industrial Policy and Promotion under Ministry of Commerce and Industry. Okay, so this first time had been released in 1942. With respect to this basket, to construct this wholesale price, we have 697 commodities. So this index or this as tracked at wholesale level. It means this, as this name, as this says wholesale are tracked either or going at a wholesale level. This is what before reaching to consumer. So this is tracked at a wholesale level or ex factory prices, at ex factory prices, where here includes lots of costs such as distribution cost as well as indirect taxes. When it further goes, this is what it add up, and the consumer pays of indirect taxes, other distributor. But at this level, these costs are not calculated at this wholesale. So at this wholesale level, this WPI track the prices in an economy. So this basket has 697 commodities. Okay, now this commodities, this basket has a three group of commodity which has a different weightage. Here, primary article, next fuel and power, manufacturing. This primary article, it has a different weightage. Okay, so this it has for the primary article, now it has a 22.6% weightage. For fuel and power, it has 13.2% weightage, and rest 64.2% is for the manufacturing. Okay, so this is what primary articles, mainly food articles, clothing, others, daily essential things to all this commodity, or this index has base for the WPI 2011 to, this is the base for WPI wholesale price. Base year is 2011, and to earlier it used to be 2004 and 2005. So this is wholesale price index. To sum up this wholesale price index is a price measurement tool where 697 commodities basket, their prices are tracked at a wholesale level. But there is an important prelims fact which you have to remember. This commodity basket, this basket doesn't include services into this. Included under the calculation of wholesale price index. That is why the Urjit Patel committee has recommended in favor of CPI to be made as a policy anchor to set monetary policy goals, or used as a important policy anchor to measure inflation in India from WPI to CPI, one of the important factor. Okay, so this WPI does not include services, and also with economic construction, if you look into this economic construction of India, the service industry has a larger sway into the GDP contribution for Indian economy, and it is rising further. So if it's not included in this calculation, into this basket, or to measure this inflation, this doesn't give the real picture of the economy. Now, from this, our discussion will further continue to the idea of consumer price index. Now before the CPI, let's one thing. This is this wholesale price. DP, Department of Industrial Policy and Promotion, under Ministry of Commerce, also releases, just remember, WPI Food Index. WPI Food Index. DIPP since 2017. Items from this basket, from the basket 697 basket of this basket which comprises 697 commodities, it could be in this basket there's prices or separate calculation or computation of the food items which are generally very dynamic in nature. Their prices goes up and down in a very frequent fashion, which you might encounter, the middle class encounter generally. So this is a further a separate calculation out of this 690 basket. Same price index is called WPI Food Index. This has been released by Ministry of Commerce since 2017. Okay. Now we'll further moving. This consumer price index, as the name says, consumer index. Now in this consumer price index, as this name says, what exactly? Here the prices is tracked at a consumer level. Pays in the market the price at track level. So at this wholesale price index, further the distribution cost as well as indirect taxes marks the final prices for any commodities in the market. But at this wholesale price index level, this is tracked at a wholesale level. But when it reaches to consumer pays a larger price which is being paid by the wholesaler. This happened because of the distribution or the logistics is to make this product available to the end consumer, and this is also due to the certain indirect taxes imposed by the government. So from this analysis, we'll have to remember this point, this important point. This is what the fiscal policies doesn't impact WPI, wholesale price index. Just remember. So here the CPI is tracked as a consumer level which pays indirect taxes also. So the fiscal policy of the governments certainly affect the CPI factor. So this is an important tidbit for the prelims from this analysis. Now, this consumer price indexes here, this track the prices with respect to the homogeneous group. This homogeneous group, or I would say the group which has the same kind of liking with respect to a particular basket of commodities. So this homogeneous group mainly being divided into two, which is urban and rural. Fine. So this urban and rural, two homogeneous group, two categories of consumer, or I would say the quality, or I would say the kind of product or the commodities used up, consumed by the urban individuals or the urban sector or the urban area is different from what is being consumed at a rural area or rural person consumes, a family or household consumes. So there is a different consumer pattern with respect to the rural household and urban household. So here, to cover this commodity, this ruler has 448 commodities in its basket, and for the urban counterpart it has a 460 basket of commodities. It has 448 and this is 460. What is this more? It's more, but in urban area or the urban household has a more choices with respect to the commodity and services in comparison to the rural counterparts. Similarly or generally, this is logically, I would say this is what happened, because this urban area has a more economic opportunity, it has a more choices, the people has a more choices with respect to the consumption pattern, with respect to the consumption. Fine. So it has a 460 commodities and 448 for the ruler. Now, this CPI for the three types. Is for industrial worker. Second, for the agriculture laborer, which is AL. This industrial worker. Now this is the rural labor, and this is either CPI urban, CPI rural, or CPI combined, or this is for combined. I would say this is urban plus rural. Okay, types of this CPI, and this four different base year as well as the agency which releases them. For CPI industrial worker, for CPI agriculture laborer, for CPI rural laborer. For agricultural laborer and rural laborer, this base year is 1986 and 7. This industrial worker 2001 and 2002. It has a different base year. Just look at the board, which is what the base year for industrial worker is 2001 and 2. For the agricultural laborer in 1986, 87, 86, this financial year is the base year for this. But the CPI Urban ruler, it has a way 2011 and 12. It has a base year 2011 and 2012. The releasing agencies are different. For CPI, this ruler number, this is being released by, at the time was CSO, Central Statistics Office, and for CPI industrial workers, CPI agriculture laborer, and CPI rural labor, it was a labor bureau. It was released by, just remember, labor bureau under Ministry of Labor. So now the CPI, this one, CPI rural, urban, I've told you, two different base year and combined. And 12 ruler counterparts 460, 448. These are the commodity basket for this. So we have to study this CPI combined or the CPI rural or urban. To make a point from this, the CPI, which is used as a nominal anchor to measure inflation in India, which is used by RBI, at the behest of the recommendation of Urjit Patel committee, which has been, this committee, remember, was formed by the government of India in 2013 to advise on monetary policy framework for India, as well as to suggest for a anchor or the marker to measure inflation in India. So this committee has gave its recommendation in 2014. On this basis, the government accepted it, and in 2015 the government has signed an agreement which is monetary policy framework agreement between RBI and the government. Under this policy, monetary policy framework agreement, now this becomes the responsibility for the RBI to control inflation within a band which is 4%, 2%. This idea or this inflation is between this band, which would be become the goal or the main goal of RBI, called inflation targeting. So this committee has suggested inflation targeting. Okay, so under this monetary policy, now the government will set monetary policy targets at the interval of 5 years in consultation with the RBI. Now RBI would be responsible, or I would say the accountable or answerable to the government when it fails to manage inflation within this range. Under this agreement further says, agreement says To measure inflation in India now, CPI combined would be used. CPI combined just to measure in inflation in India. This would be the policy marker for inflation in India. So this CPI combined find generally on TV news channel, on newspaper, the rate of inflation which is mentioned generally is CPI combined. Okay, so this inflation or this rate of inflation which finds the of news channel, newspapers in its headlines are called generally headline inflation. So this inflation, headline inflation, is nothing, or I would say this is based on CPI combined. Okay. Now remember, go to the memory lane and remember what we have discussed. This WPI has a major drawback. It was not having rate which could accommodate. It doesn't have this 696 commodities. CPI both service as well as commodities. So it includes services, this gives the real picture. Household generally pays for the commodities, but right now or in this burgeoning Indian economy, you might find there is a more space for service sector. Here is what exactly the households are paying for lots of services, education services, legal services, lots of services are there. Fine. Transport services, as the economy is growing, their share is also growing. So this gives the real picture for the economy. Okay guys, so this is what exactly consumer price index. And now this one important thing is also the CPI combined. This is used, or the CPI is generally used to measure dearness allowances, which is generally called Mahangai Bhatta. So this dearness allowances the employees by the government, by the private organization to its employee to fight inflation, so that their income could be relevant after 5 years of services. So this dearness allowances is calculated, is based on CPI, not WPI, because this is the real measure to gauge the cost of living in any economy. Okay, so this is what exactly the discussion with respect to CPI, inflation. We have discussed this at certain types, the measurement, and now the last but not the least, how so to check this inflation, we have a three kind of policy instance: from fiscal point of view, from monetary, and administrative. Fiscal to fiscal. When inflation happens in the economy, simple inflation, understand this, there is a people have more money in their hand, fine, or there is a less supply for that product. That is why this prices of commodities or services are rising up in the economy. Okay, so here this at this fiscal level, the government will take what it can take tax measure, taxes over it, so that the people having less disposable income to spend on different commodities. Fine. Now monetary measures generally is taken by the government, and also here this fiscal measure, the government can increase or decrease non-governmental expenditure. I would say mainly decrease non-governmental expenditures. Fine, this could happen, this high money in the economy could happen because of this deficit things or the deficit financing of the governments, more money into pump into the economy. So this more pumping into money into the economy leads to the increase in the money supply, more purchasing power, people have more money. It means the inflation is a phenomenon which is what? Too much money chasing few goods, at the too much money people are at the end. So the government should try to suck this extra money from the market, and this could be done by reducing lots of non-governmental or other expenditure. Reduce this financing, deficit financing. Now at this monetary count, generally RBI performs open market operation, selling and buying of the government securities, treasury bill, G-Sec, or it could be done by rate, reverse repo rate, bank rate, market SLR, CRR, that's fine. So now administrative measures could be taken by the government with respect to check the practices of hoarding, marketing. The government can also restrict export so that this commodity which is being made for the international economy could be diverted to the local need, as this local economy is facing crunch or the scarcity of that particular product. So the government has lots of act related to it. So through this three ways we can fight this inflation, which is a necessary evil. I have discussed at the scraping level this is much bad, when it's going beyond and reaching to galloping and hyperinflation become demon for any economy. So this necessary evil, which is oxymoron, we have discussed today, necessary evil. Okay, so now this oxymoron we have discussed from know-how, what is this all about, different details about the inflation. Now I'll sum up this class. So this what inflation we have discussed, the different, what is inflation, what are different types of inflation based on its rate of growth and based on its causes. Further, different terms related to inflation or different instruments to measure inflation, inflation targeting, different committees, the committees such as Urijit committee which has formed by the government, and this what exactly the measure how to check this. So this was the end of the session. So I hope you will be benefited from my lectures. For more such lectures, stay tuned with my economic classes at Vijetha IAS Academy. Thank you. Thanks a lot.